The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council sparkled under the light of 3 artificial suns. Its crystal walls reached up into the darkness of space, creating an atmosphere of both beauty and power. Today, the hall held representatives from over 200 species, all gathered for a historic moment. Humanity's first official military assessment. Captain James Miller stood straight in his crisp blue uniform, the Golden Earth Defense Force insignia gleaming on his chest. He couldn't help but notice how different he looked compared to the colorful array of alien delegates. Some floated in anti-gravity fields, others towered 3 times his height, and a few existed as pure energy forms contained in special suits. Ambassador Gray, a tall being with silvery skin that rippled like mercury, approached the human delegation. "Captain Miller, we welcome Earth to this historic meeting." The ambassador's translator converted their musical tones into English. "However, we must address certain concerns before proceeding with Earth's integration into the Galactic Defense Network." Miller nodded politely. "Of course, Ambassador. We're here to answer any questions. Our preliminary scans of your military installations have left us puzzled." Ambassador Gray gestured to a holographic display that appeared in the center of the hall. It showed images of Earth's various military bases, focusing on their armories. "Your species has achieved faster than light travel, yet you still maintain vast stockpiles of chemical-propelled projectile weapons. Why?" A murmur ran through the assembled aliens. Many of them produced sounds that Miller's translator interpreted as laughter or scoffs. "Simple, Ambassador," Miller replied, maintaining his professional composure. "They work." "Work." A new voice joined the conversation. A being made of blue crystalline structures stepped forward, their form catching and refracting light. "I am Commander Blue, Chief Military Advisor to the Council. Captain, these weapons you cling to use explosive chemicals to propel metal fragments. They are inefficient, loud, and primitive compared to our plasma-based weaponry." Miller reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple brass bullet. The motion caused several alien guards to activate their energy shields, making Miller smile. "This, Commander, is a 7.62x51 NATO round. It's based on a design that's over 300 years old. Would you like to know why we still use it?" Commander Blue's crystalline form shifted in what Miller had learned was their version of curiosity. "Please, enlighten us." "This projectile doesn't need power cells that can fail. It doesn't require complex targeting systems. It isn't affected by electromagnetic interference. It costs almost nothing to produce. And most importantly," Miller paused for effect, "it does its job every single time you pull the trigger." "But surely," Ambassador Gray interjected, "your scientists have developed more advanced weapons. We've detected energy weapon signatures in your military bases as well." "Of course we have," Miller agreed. "We have plasma rifles, laser cannons, and particle accelerator weapons. We use them all. But we never stopped improving our ballistic weapons either. Why abandon a reliable technology just because you have a new one?" Commander Blue moved closer to examine the bullet Miller held. "Your species' attachment to outdated technology is concerning. The Council's military doctrine clearly shows that energy-based weapons are superior in every way." Miller pocketed the bullet and smiled. "Commander, with all due respect, military history is filled with examples of superior forces being defeated by supposedly inferior weapons. Humanity learned long ago not to put all our eggs in one basket." The translator struggled briefly with the idiom, causing confusion among the aliens until Miller clarified. "We believe in maintaining multiple approaches to solving problems. Sometimes the old ways work best." Ambassador Gray's silver skin rippled with what Miller recognized as diplomatic concern. "The Council will need to evaluate this philosophy. It goes against centuries of established military doctrine." "We look forward to the evaluation," Miller replied confidently. "In fact, we've prepared a demonstration that might help explain our position. Would the Council be interested in observing a joint training exercise?" Commander Blue's crystalline form pulsed with light. "Yes, I believe that would be most educational." though I doubt it will change our assessment of your primitive weapons." Miller's smile widened slightly. "We'll see, Commander. We'll see." The meeting continued, but Miller could already tell from the whispered conversations and subtle gestures around the room that Earth's first impression had certainly been memorable. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. 3 days after the council meeting, Commander Blue stood in the middle of Earth's largest military training facility in Nevada. The hot desert sun beat down on their crystalline form, creating small rainbows on the dusty ground. They watched as human soldiers moved equipment around the base, their expressions showing neither fear nor awe at the alien observer. "Your facility seems." Commander Blue paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Basic." Major Tom Wilson, the base commander, grinned. "Sometimes basic is better, Commander. Would you like to see our weapons storage first, or should we start with the firing range?" "The storage," Blue decided. "I want to understand why you keep such large quantities of these projectile weapons." They walked into a large concrete building. The temperature dropped noticeably, and rows of carefully maintained weapons lined the walls. Rifles, pistols, shotguns, and larger mounted weapons filled the space, each one cleaned, labeled, and ready for use. Blue's crystalline body flickered with confusion. "I see no power cells, no energy cores. How do you maintain these weapons?" Wilson picked up a rifle, checking that it was clear before handling it. "That's the beauty of it, Commander. These weapons don't need power cells. Regular maintenance, clean ammunition, and proper storage. That's all they need." "Primitive," Blue muttered, their translator barely catching the word. "Let me show you something," Wilson said, leading Blue to a workbench. He field stripped the rifle with practiced ease, laying out each part. Every soldier learns to do this. They can clean, repair, and reassemble these weapons in their sleep. Can your troops do the same with plasma rifles? Blue's form shifted uncomfortably. "Our weapons are maintained by specialized technicians. They're too complex for regular soldiers to modify." "And what happens when those technicians aren't available?" Wilson asked, quickly reassembling the rifle. "What happens when your power cells run dry?" "That's why we have backup power systems and—" A loud alarm cut through their conversation. Wilson's radio crackled to life. "Sir, we have an equipment failure at range 3. The electronic targeting systems are down." Wilson smiled. "Perfect timing. Commander, would you like to see how we handle equipment failures?" They walked to the range where a group of soldiers had been training. The high-tech target systems lay dark and inactive, but the soldiers weren't idle. They had already set up simple paper targets and were continuing their practice. "No delays, no technicians needed," Wilson explained. "Just adapt and overcome." Blue watched as the soldiers fired their weapons. Each shot was loud, making their crystalline form vibrate slightly. But they couldn't deny the accuracy they were witnessing. "The noise and recoil seem inefficient," they noted. "Our energy weapons are silent and have no kickback." "True," Wilson agreed. "But these rifles work in sandstorms, underwater, in extreme temperatures, and even in space. No special modifications needed, just different ammunition types." Blue moved closer to observe a soldier field stripping their weapon. "Your troops seem very comfortable with these weapons." "It's more than comfort, Commander. It's trust. Every soldier knows their weapon will work when they need it. No computer glitches, no power failures, no software updates needed." A young soldier approached with a rifle. "Sir, would the commander like to try?" Blue's crystalline form flickered with surprise. "You would let me handle your weapons?" "Of course," Wilson said. "Sometimes the best way to understand something is to try it yourself." Blue carefully took the rifle, trying to mimic the stance they had observed. The weapon felt solid, real in a way energy weapons never did. They pulled the trigger. The recoil surprised them, but the paper target showed a hit. Not perfect, but respectable for a first try. Blue fired again, and again, until the magazine was empty. "Well?" Wilson asked. Blue handed the rifle back carefully. It's different than I expected. The directness of it, the mechanical nature. I begin to understand why your species maintains these weapons. Wilson nodded. That's just the beginning, Commander. Tomorrow, we'll show you our Special Forces training. Then you'll really understand why we keep our primitive weapons. Blue's form pulsed with what might have been anticipation. Perhaps these humans weren't as primitive as the Council had thought. The morning sun hadn't yet risen when Commander Blue arrived at the Special Forces training area. The air was cold, and stars still dotted the desert sky. Captain Miller and Major Wilson waited with a team of 6 human soldiers dressed in black combat gear. Today's demonstration will show you why we keep these weapons, Miller said, checking his watch. The Council provided us with your latest shield technology for testing. We've set up 4 target stations with those shields. Blue's crystalline form brightened with confidence. Those shields can stop any energy weapon in the galaxy. They're used to protect our most important facilities. We know, Miller smiled. That's why we asked to test them. Team, get ready. The soldiers moved silently into position. Blue noticed they carried different weapons than the basic rifles from yesterday. These looked more complex, with various attachments and modifications. What are they carrying? Blue asked. Standard Special Forces kit, Wilson explained. Modified M4 carbines with subsonic ammunition. Simple, but effective. Blue's translator struggled with some terms, but they understood enough. Your soldiers plan to attack our shields with those primitive weapons. Watch, Miller said, raising a pair of binoculars. The first soldier moved forward in the dim light. Blue's sensors could barely detect them. Their gear seemed to absorb most scanning attempts. The soldier reached the first shield station, a dome of softly humming energy protecting a target inside. Impossible, Blue said. Our sensors would detect any approach. The sharp crack of gunfire cut through the morning air. The shield flickered but didn't fail. However, Blue noticed small objects passing straight through it. The target inside registered multiple hits. How? Blue demanded. Nothing can penetrate those shields. Miller handed them the binoculars. Your shields stop energy weapons and fast-moving objects above a certain speed. But simple physics tells us that slower objects can pass through. Our subsonic ammunition moves just slow enough to slip past. The demonstration continued. Each soldier showed different techniques. One used special ammunition that fragmented after passing through the shield. Another demonstrated how regular bullets could be fired at specific angles to exploit weak points in the shield's geometry. This is, Blue's form rippled with concern, disturbing. This is adaptation, Wilson corrected. Your civilization focused so much on energy weapons that you forgot about basic physical attacks. Every shield has a weakness. The final demonstration involved all 6 soldiers attacking one shield simultaneously. They used different weapons and ammunition types, overwhelming the shield's ability to adapt to multiple threat types at once. The target inside was destroyed in seconds. But our sensors, Blue began, can't detect chemical propellants very well, Miller finished. They're looking for energy signatures, power sources, heat blooms. Our weapons produce those too, but much less than plasma or laser weapons. Sometimes being primitive has advantages. Blue watched as the soldiers gathered their equipment. Their movements were precise, professional. These soldiers, they trained to fight enemies with superior technology. They trained to fight anyone, using whatever works best, Wilson said. Energy weapons have their place. We use them too. But sometimes you meet a bullet that will work even if your enemy has better shields, better sensors, or better technology. As if to emphasize the point, the last soldier fired a single shot at an incredibly long distance. The bullet curved in the morning air, affected by wind and gravity, yet still hit its target. No energy weapon would have followed such an unpredictable path. The Council must know about these vulnerabilities, Blue said quietly. Miller nodded. That's why we're showing you. We don't want to fight the Council. We want to help protect it. Sometimes the old ways are the best backup plan. The sun finally rose over the desert, casting long shadows across the training ground. Blue watched the soldiers clean their weapons with practiced ease, each movement showing years of training and trust in their equipment. I will recommend immediate changes to our shield designs, Blue announced. And, perhaps, a review of our policy on projectile weapons. Miller smiled. That's why we keep the old ways alive, Commander. Not because they're better, but because sometimes being primitive is exactly what you need to be. The emergency alarm blared through the Galactic Council's command center. Red lights pulsed across the crystalline walls as representatives from dozens of species rushed to their stations. Commander Blue stood before the main viewing screen, their crystalline form dark with concern. Report, Ambassador Gray demanded, their silver skin rippling with anxiety. A holographic display showed a distant human colony world, New Haven, under attack. Massive dark shapes moved through the planet's orbit, ships that looked like giant insects, their hulls reflecting every energy blast fired at them. The swarm, Blue said quietly. They've returned. Captain Miller, still on Earth but connected via hologram, watched the attack unfold. What are we dealing with, Commander? The swarm is a species we haven't encountered in over 50 years, Blue explained. They adapt quickly to any weapon used against them. Last time, we barely drove them back. Now they're stronger. The display showed Council warships firing their most powerful energy weapons. Beams of pure plasma struck the swarm ships, but their shields simply absorbed or reflected every hit. Our weapons are useless, Ambassador Gray said, their voice trembling. They've adapted to everything we have. Miller watched as the swarm ships launched landing craft toward New Haven. The colony had 10,000 human settlers, all now in danger. Council defense forces on the ground fired energy rifles at the descending ships, but like their space-based counterparts, these weapons had no effect. How long until Earth forces can reach New Haven? Blue asked. 6 hours by fastest jump drive, Miller replied, already sending orders through his tablet. But we're sending something the swarm hasn't seen before. On the screen, the first swarm troops emerged from their landing craft. They looked like giant armored insects, walking on 4 legs with 2 arm-like limbs, carrying advanced energy weapons. Their chitinous armor seemed to shimmer with the same energy-absorbing properties as their ships. The colony's defenses are failing, Gray reported. Their energy shields can't handle the swarm's adapted weapons. We're losing ground positions every minute. Miller's face showed grim determination. What's the status of the colonial militia? A new voice joined the conversation. Colonel Banks, the colony's defense leader. We have 300 trained militia members, Captain. But our standard energy rifles aren't even scratching their armor. Open the red-labeled crates in your emergency bunker, Miller ordered. Authorization code, Echo 7 Delta 9. Banks disappeared from the screen for a moment. When he returned, his expression had changed. Sir, these are standard Earth military firearms, Miller finished. Everything from pistols to anti-material rifles. Start distributing them now. Blue's form flickered with sudden understanding. You planned for this. We plan for everything, Miller said. Every human colony has a hidden arsenal of primitive weapons, just in case the advanced ones fail. The next few minutes showed why. As the swarm troops advanced through the colony's streets, they met something they'd never encountered: simple bullets. Their shields, designed to stop and adapt to energy weapons, did nothing against solid metal projectiles moving just under the speed of sound. It's working, Banks reported, his voice excited. Their armor is tough, but the heavy rifles are punching right through. On the screen, militia members fired from windows and doorways. The swarm troops, for the first time, began to fall. Their advanced shields useless against chunks of accelerated metal. Impossible, Gray whispered. They're being defeated by bullets, Blue finished. the oldest human weapon in the galaxy. Miller allowed himself a small smile. The militia can hold them back, but we'll need more to drive them off completely. Commander Blue, remember those shield weaknesses we demonstrated? Blue's crystal form brightened. Your special forces, already on their way, along with something else. Miller's hologram showed new data. We're bringing our own ships, ones equipped with mass drivers and good old-fashioned armor-piercing rounds. Let's see how the swarm handles that. As the battle continued on New Haven, Ambassador Gray turned to Blue. Perhaps we should reconsider our assessment of primitive weapons. Indeed, Blue agreed, watching another swarm troops fall to simple gunfire. Sometimes the old ways are exactly what you need. 6 hours felt like an eternity in battle, but the militia of New Haven held their ground. Armed with their primitive weapons, they had created a defensive line around the colony's main settlement. The swarm's advance had slowed, confused by their suddenly vulnerable troops. Then the sky lit up. Earth Defense Force ships entering the system, announced the colony's eye. 5 heavy cruisers and 10 destroyer-class vessels. Commander Blue, still watching from the Council Command Center, noticed something odd about the human ships. They lacked the usual energy weapon ports that marked Council vessels. Instead, they bristled with what looked like oversized gun barrels. What are those? Ambassador Gray asked, their silver skin reflecting the tactical display. Railroad guns, Captain Miller explained, his hologram showing a fierce grin. Electromagnetic accelerators that fire solid metal rounds. No fancy energy signatures, no plasma cores. Just good old-fashioned kinetic energy. The first shot from the human fleet demonstrated exactly what he meant. A heavy cruiser fired its main gun, sending a tungsten rod the size of a small car hurtling toward one of the swarm's capital ships. The alien vessel's advanced shields, designed to reflect and absorb energy weapons, did nothing to stop the solid projectile. The impact tore through the swarm ship like paper. Multiple targets eliminated, reported the fleet eye. Swarm ships attempting to adapt shields. But there was nothing to adapt to. The physics were simple. A large mass moving at high speed carried enormous energy. No shield could ignore basic physics. On the ground, things changed just as dramatically. Earth's special forces arrived in stealth dropships, their black armor making them nearly invisible in the colony's shadows. They carried an arsenal that would have looked at home in a museum to most council races, modified rifles, shotguns, and even simple crossbows. Team 1, engaging, came the calm report. A group of swarm warriors disappeared in a hail of subsonic bullets, their supposedly impenetrable armor pierced by simple lead and steel. Team 2, target eliminated. Another squad used shotguns loaded with special flechette rounds, the spread of tiny metal darts shredding through the gaps in swarm armor. Commander Blue's crystalline form pulsed with amazement. They're not just winning. They're doing it without a single energy weapon. In orbit, the battle continued. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, their ships firing salvos of solid projectiles. Some were simple metal slugs, others were sophisticated penetrator rounds, and a few were old-fashioned explosive shells. The swarm, for all their adaptive technology, couldn't counter such basic attacks. Enemy fleet at 60% strength and falling, reported the fleet eye. They're attempting to retreat. On the ground, the Special Forces teams had linked up with the militia. They shared ammunition and tactics, showing the colonists the most effective ways to take down swarm troops. The aliens, used to fighting enemies with energy weapons, had no defense against attacks they couldn't detect or adapt to. Look at this, Miller said, highlighting a tactical display. Their ships are trying to reconfigure their shields to stop our rounds. But every time they adjust to one type of ammunition, you switch to another. Blue finished, understanding dawning in their crystalline structure. Simple but brilliant. The battle ended faster than it began. The remaining swarm ships, their hulls punctured by repeated kinetic impacts, flood the system. On the ground, The last alien troops either retreated or fell to the combined fire of Earth forces and colonial militia. As the dust settled, Ambassador Gray turned to Commander Blue. "I believe we owe the humans an apology." "More than that," Blue replied, watching as human ships began landing to help with cleanup and repairs. "We owe them our thanks, and perhaps a request for some primitive weapons of our own." Miller's hologram smiled. "I'm sure we can work something out. After all, sometimes the old ways are the best ways." The council members watched as human soldiers helped colonists rebuild, their simple weapons still ready at their sides. No one called those weapons primitive anymore. 3 days after the Battle of New Haven, Captain Miller stood in a rebuilt conference room on the colony. Holographic displays showed the aftermath. Destroyed swarm ships, captured alien weapons, and repair crews at work. Commander Blue and Ambassador Gray had come in person to understand how a primitive civilization had defeated the galaxy's most feared enemy. "Now you see why we keep our old weapons," Miller said, laying his service pistol on the table. Next to it, he placed a captured swarm energy rifle. "It's not about being primitive. It's about being prepared." Blue picked up the pistol carefully, their crystalline form reflecting in its polished surface. "But surely advancing to energy weapons would be better, more efficient." Miller shook his head. "Let me tell you a story from Earth's history. During our Second World War, we had troops fighting in the Pacific Islands. Their fancy new weapons often failed in the jungle conditions, but their simple bolt-action rifles kept working, no matter the mud, rain, or salt water. A single example from ancient history. Gray's silver skin rippled with doubt. "No," Miller replied. "A lesson we never forgot. Every time we developed new weapons, we kept improving the old ones too. When we made laser rifles, we also made better bullets. When we created plasma guns, we also created better propellants." He activated a hologram showing Earth's weapon development over the centuries. "We never abandoned what worked. We just made it work better." "But the maintenance, the logistics," Blue began, "are simpler than you think," Miller interrupted. "A bullet is just metal and chemicals. We can manufacture them anywhere. Energy weapons need rare materials, complex power cells, specialized technicians." He pointed to the swarm rifle. "Their weapons are incredible. Self-adapting, self-repairing, practically unlimited power. But they had one massive weakness. They were all the same type of weapon. Once we found a way past their defenses, they had no backup plan." Gray moved closer to the display. "You're suggesting that technological advancement isn't always about making everything new," Miller finished. "Sometimes it's about making the old things better. Look at our ships that fought here. The rail guns they use. Based on technology from the 1940s. We just made them better, stronger, more accurate." Blue's form pulsed with understanding. "Your civilization never specialized. You kept developing everything." "Exactly," Miller smiled. "Energy weapons, ballistic weapons, even basic explosives. We kept them all. Because you never know what you'll need." He brought up footage from the battle. The swarm expected energy weapons. Their shields were perfect against them, but they never considered someone would shoot them with simple metal bullets. They didn't think anyone still used such primitive weapons. "A costly assumption," Gray noted. "Very costly," Miller agreed. "But here's the real truth. We don't keep these weapons because they're better. We keep them because they're different. Because sometimes the old solution is the right solution." He picked up his pistol again. "This design is over 500 years old. We've improved it, made it more accurate, more reliable. But at its heart, it's still just a metal tube that throws smaller pieces of metal really fast. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need." Blue turned to Gray. "The Council must reconsider its military doctrine. We've become too dependent on a single type of technology." "Agreed." Gray's skin rippled with determination. "Captain Miller, would Earth be willing to assist in this matter?" Miller smiled. "We'd be happy to help. We can start with the basics, simple, reliable weapons that work when everything else fails. Then we can show you how we integrated them with advanced technology. And the cost? Blue asked. Consider it an investment in galactic security, Miller replied. After all, the swarm might come back, and next time they'll be ready for bullets too. That's why we never stop improving, never stop adapting. He looked at the weapons on the table. Old or new, primitive or advanced. What matters is that it works when you need it to. That's the real truth about human weapons. We don't care how it looks. We care that it works. 1 year after the Battle of New Haven, the Galactic Council's main training facility looked very different. Along with the usual energy weapon ranges and shield practice areas, new sections had appeared. The sound of gunfire echoed through specially built ranges, and the clatter of mechanical weapons mixed with the hum of energy rifles. Commander Blue stood at the center of it all, their crystalline form reflecting the morning sunlight. Next to them, Captain Miller watched as alien troops from 20 different species practiced with Earth-designed weapons. I never thought I'd see a Centaurian using a shotgun, Miller commented, watching a tall, four-armed alien handle the weapon with growing confidence. Times change, Blue replied. Thanks to Earth's influence, our military doctrine has undergone its biggest revision in 500 years. The training facility showcased this change perfectly. Each section now taught both energy and ballistic weapons. Alien soldiers learned to maintain simple mechanical firearms alongside their advanced energy weapons. The philosophy was simple: be ready for anything. Look there, Blue pointed to a group of new recruits. An Earth instructor taught them how to clean and maintain their rifles, just as humans had done for centuries. No complex diagnostics, no power calibrations, just simple mechanics that anyone can learn. Miller nodded. That's the beauty of it. A soldier who understands their weapon, truly understands it, will always fight better. They walked past a workshop where council engineers studied human weapon designs, not to make them more advanced, but to understand their elegant simplicity. On one bench, they had disassembled an old Earth revolver, marveling at how few parts it needed to work reliably. The swarm has been quiet, Blue noted as they entered the command center. Our scouts report they're rebuilding, but differently now. Their ships show signs of physical armor alongside their energy shields. They're adapting, Miller said, just like they always do. But now, so are we. The command center's main screen showed the new Galactic Defense Fleet. Council ships now carry both energy weapons and railguns, their crews trained with all types of weapons, ready to switch tactics when needed. The old joke about primitive weapons had become a point of pride. The Council has a request, Blue said, turning to Miller. We want to establish a permanent Earth advisory group to help us maintain this balance of old and new. Miller smiled. I think we can arrange that. After all, helping allies is an old human tradition too. They watched as a group of alien officers practiced with simple bows and arrows, not because they would use them in combat, but to understand the basic principles of ballistic weapons. Understanding the old ways helped them appreciate both ancient and modern tools. You know what the best part is? Blue asked, their form glowing softly. We've started finding our own primitive weapons from various cultures. Things we abandoned centuries ago that might still have value. That's the real legacy here, Miller agreed. Not just adopting Earth's weapons, but remembering that old doesn't mean obsolete. A young alien cadet approached them, holding a well-maintained rifle. Commander Blue, Captain Miller, I've qualified on both energy and ballistic weapons now. Excellent, Blue said. Which do you prefer? The cadet stood straight. Both, Commander. As the humans say, the right tool for the right job. Miller grinned. That phrase had become common throughout the Council forces. It represented their new philosophy. Use what works, regardless of its origin or age. As the day ended, Miller and Blue stood watching the sunset. The sound of practice fire had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of the facility powering down. A year ago, "We thought your weapons were primitive," Blue said softly. "Now we understand. It was our thinking that was primitive." Miller nodded. "The universe is too big, too unpredictable to rely on just one type of technology. Sometimes you need an energy rifle that can punch through steel. Sometimes you need a simple bullet that just works. And sometimes," Blue added, their crystal form glowing with amusement, "you need both." The legacy of Earth's primitive weapons had become something greater. A reminder that progress doesn't always mean abandoning the past. It means building upon it, learning from it, and keeping what works, no matter how simple it might seem.